Now, Devon, you have an interesting perspective on the benefit of having an organization that is not a 501c3. And I think that kind of goes to what you were talking about in terms of having these institutions that are self sustaining and not dependent on forces that may not have our best interests. So, can you talk a little bit about that, about your organization and kind of your philosophy around that?
Absolutely. So, me and my colleagues were fortunate to be kind of intellectually incubated in a space that is informed by the Black radical tradition. And as a result, in the activity of policy debate, many of us come out of the activity of policy debate. And for folks who are not familiar, policy debate is the most rigorous form of academic debate that exists, and many of the people that come out of the activity end up working in major public policy institutions. Think tanks that essentially set the agenda for
Mhm.
what lawmakers do. And Karl Rove was a policy debater. Um, you know, Rumsfeld, like people who have had very powerful in the public policy arena. We came into the activity extending an intellectual and academic innovation in the activity, challenging the way that white supremacy and racism were part and parcel of the research methodology and policy approaches of the activity. And we were successful doing that. After we were finished with the activity, we founded an organization because we wanted to do that public policy advocacy work from kind of a, Pan-Africanist, Black self-determination focused perspective in the public policy arena. Because we saw that in the Baltimore landscape that was sorely absent, that many of the organizations advocating for policy were not organizations of and from our community. We were clear that if we were a 501c3, a nonprofit organization, that we would be largely dependent on philanthropy. And philanthropy historically has had an interest in putting forward versions of advocacy for Black people that render us dependent on their institutions and see Black people primarily as recipients of social services. And not that that's bad, but to see us solely as recipients of social services and not as a people that can build the institutions for our own thriving and self sustaining, we were clear that philanthropy was not going to fund an organization that would challenge that overarching dominant paradigm. And so we're an LLC, and we have kind of a social entrepreneurship approach to sustaining ourselves, which requires us to be able to meet the needs of our community, and to be able to. So we have what are called community sustainers. So right now we're at about 600 people or so who give us money once a month that support our work, that are mostly from our community. And that's important because there are things we get to say and do in public policy spaces that other people can't say because their funding would be impacted by it. And that's why I'm so, to your point, that's why I'm so insistent about this importance in building like self-sustaining institutions and an ecosystem of institutions. Because when you look, for instance, at the human social service sector, right, public health, education, social work, um, there's a emerging recognition of the ineptitudes of the traditional approaches to these disciplines that are rooted in the fact that many of them don't have any regard for the technologies of human service that come out of African people's bodies of work. But these institutions their business model is profiteering off of Black suffering, and those who struggle against it within those institutions are often marginalized. And so I just say all that to say that I think my perspective on reparations and the importance of how the wealth is transferred and how we hold on to it is essential, because what I don't want is an environment where your traditional big box white nonprofit, traditional social welfare bureaucrats are the ones that are administering services to our community that perpetuate, notions of our inherent pathology that keep our community, continually dependent. And so that's really that helps to really ground my perspective.